Welcome back to the Sober Sex Sofa. Shanti Patty Owen here. I am your host for this channel where we discuss sobriety, sex, and mental health. And I'm super excited to have my very first interview. You will soon discover exactly why I started the Sober Sex Sofa. I'm going to introduce you to television producer Stephen Pettinger. Stephen is known for shows like the ABC show Wife Swap, which you will soon find out how we met. Also the Fox show Nanny 911. He developed and show ran the huge history cable hit American Pickers. And his resume is huge. Also, Stephen doesn't like to talk about himself much, so I just wanted to give you a few little tidbits. Here is part one of my chat with Stephen. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Stephen Pettinger, who I met in 2009 doing a television show.
Well, thank you. I'm very honored to be your first guest.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking me.
Okay, so I just want to tell my viewers, first of all, how we met.
So I was the co-executive producer of the show Wife Swap on ABC. I remember watching your casting tape and saying to the executive producer, Mike Gamson at the time, we have got to get these two.
So back then, I was working with my ex-husband. We had a dating and relationship coach business. I had been a dating and relationship coach since I think 2003 or 4. And then when I met my husband in 2007, he also had a background in this arena, so we merged. He was the fashion designer, let's say. He was the one who designed all our crazy costumes, and I was much more of the content. So we did several workshops publicly in various costumes. And that is how I think we got the notice of somebody at Wife Swap.
And it was interesting how we met, because I didn't really meet many of the families because I was in an ivory tower downtown, and I only met the families if something went wrong. However, I was finishing up the show, and so as my last hurrah, I said I would go out into the field and produce on the ground that final episode. So if I'd continued on the show and I hadn't been wrapping up, I wouldn't have met you.
By the way, I had a blast. My daughter and my ex-husband couldn't understand why I was so excited, but if you look at what I'm doing now, I work as a sober companion. I live with people. I live in other people's homes. I live their life. And I've always been fascinated with jumping into somebody else's world.
I knew you'd be great, because the thing is with Wife Swap, it was made with a lot of sincerity. I mean, we would cast people who lived their lives in very deliberate ways. They'd thought through why they'd chosen a certain path, and often very different ways of life. And it was a social experiment to bring two extremes together and see what they could learn from each other. And I think that the best shows were the women who really just jumped in with both feet, jumped into the experience and gave it 100% and tried to learn and also help the other side. So I remember you went to, was it Wisconsin?
It was in Wisconsin. And it was, I have to tell you, there was a moment where I was feeling like there was a hostage takeover, because as soon as I got in the limousine, it looked all glamorous. And as soon as the door shut, I was asked to give my phone. So there was no prep. It was just, let me have your phone. Do you have a laptop or, whatever with you, any other electronics? And, it'll be returned to you in a few weeks. And I thought, whoa, this is a little scary. And then they didn't tell me where I was going. They just said, well, I'll give you a heads up when we're there. And I think we took 3 planes when the car drove up to the house. I mean, there was just nothing around. There was just woods and this long driveway and a big log cabin. I was like, oh, it's going to be interesting.
I think a lot of the wives were often very surprised that We made them walk the walk. This was not a scripted show. We would know activities. We would map out the week. Do you remember each wife wrote a Bible about how they
Oh, I remember that. Yes, I do.
and the wife would sit down and read the other wife's Bible when she arrived. So we need the basic building blocks for each show in terms of the events that happened by following the Bible.
Yeah, and I can tell you how many people that I've encountered, friends or casual acquaintances, when they heard that I was on the show, I was like, yeah, that's really fake, isn't it? And I said, no, those were organic feelings I felt. As a matter of fact, I think the first day the director had said something to me because I was kind of calm about something that my new husband had said to me. And she stopped the camera and she said, listen, how do you feel about that? And I said, how friggin' annoying. And she said, so why didn't you get annoyed when he did it? And I said, well, I'm going to be gone in a few weeks. I don't really have to deal with it. And she said, oh, I see. She said, no, act as if this is going to be the rest of your life.
And so the challenge really was on the show to get people to be honest.
Yes.
Because it was a nice check we would pay. And a lot of the time people would sign up and think they could outsmart us and keep their feelings to themselves. And, you know, we've been there, done that, got the t-shirt in terms of pushing people to be themselves, because the whole point of the show is about growth and learning. And if you're not being honest to the process, then what's the point of the whole thing?
Right,
It's a complete waste of time.
That's why I say you gave me this opportunity to spread my wings in that arena. And that's what I'm doing with the Sober Sex Sofa. This is an authentic place where people can come and feel safe and be honest. And if I can sort of bring us back to current day. So what was really great is that we did this show and that we have stayed in touch since this time, since 2000.
I think
no,
you're the only one. Nobody else.
I thought you did this with everybody but
no,
you know, I didn't want to annoy you because, you know, you had a very high powered job and busy. But I just, you know, we would touch base maybe once a year. Sometimes we'd meet when you were in Manhattan and I lived there, and we'd meet for coffee or a meal. And it was just nice. And I think that we had a big meeting when I told you that I realized I have sex addiction. And you were like, whoa. And I told you I started writing my memoirs about this journey into sobriety. And you were so encouraging and helpful. I wrote a series, a very dramatic series about a woman with sex addiction. It is loosely based on my life, but it's quite different as well. So you called me and you had me telling you all these ideas that I had. And you said, well, I think it's just kind of fascinating what you're talking about. And I think you should start yourself a channel, you know, maybe a YouTube channel, you know, a podcast. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? You know, I kind of had my blinders on.
I think it's just this fascinating and exciting world. And I think that there are certain people that resonate on there. And when we were talking, I was thinking you'd be great on YouTube with your own channel, because I believe that the people that are working are authentic people. And I just don't think you can get more authentic than you. And I've always thought this with television. I think the audience connects with authenticity. And I think that's why Wife Swap worked in many ways, is because we would make people go through the process. And when they would break down, and when there were tears or an emotional breakthrough, or, you know, we would film an extraordinary number of hours for a 1 hour show. There were no shortcuts because you had to go through the experience in order for it to be real and for it to resonate. And I've been getting into YouTube, and I was like, Shanti, there's a whole new world out there, and let's think about this. So I sent you a bunch of links. Do you remember, of people that I follow?
Yes, you did. And that's when I started flipping out, because all I could think of was, how am I going to make that happen? I'm a baby boomer and quite the technophobe. I mean, I can just barely figure out, emails and text messages. And, I figured out Zoom because of all of my 12-step programs. But I'm looking at all of these channels going, I can't make that happen. And they put a video came flying in over here, and then there's text over there. So that was all I could see.
No, I just said, just sit there and talk and then just send it me. I'll do the rest. So
If
don't
you
worry about that. I said,
really,
just talk.
all I can say is without you, this would not happen. The Sober Sex Sofa would not be here if it wasn't for you. Hands down, no doubt about that.
It's tremendously important. I think there's a place here. I think that YouTube itself, it's such a special time in human history that we have access to all of these stories, all of the people that have gone through life and who are there in this community that are helping each other. And I think it's magical. It's extraordinary. And I want to be part of it in whatever way I can be. And I think I've had a pretty successful career in television, but I don't think
I
I've.
would say very successful.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think,
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
you're quite modest.
I think there's an element of me as well, which is okay, this is a new, exciting world, but also how can I give back? And if I'm helping you help others, then in some way I'm part of that.
I got rid of my television, I don't know how many years ago, somewhere around the time I started my memoirs, because when things got challenging, I just wanted to turn the TV on and zone out. So I got rid of my television many years ago. And because I have cable, so if I felt like checking in to see what was happening in the world, I'd go onto YouTube originally just to look at news. And then I started watching people's stories
Mhm.
and listening to people talk about history. I felt like I was in a visual library, a visual and auditory library, and I would put it on and do my dishes or fold my laundry and occasionally check in with the video. I said, wow, this is really interesting. And then I'd sit down for 5 or 10 minutes and then go back to a chore. And I have been in love with YouTube for years, and nobody could understand how I couldn't have a television. And I said, yeah, I got YouTube.
It makes perfect sense. And I think that if you've got an inquiring mind and you want to learn and you appreciate humanity, it's a complete playground.
I love it.
Not only in terms of what you can learn on there, which is unbelievable. I mean, I truly believe that you can get a university education now on YouTube. But now, if you want to learn, you have got access to the greatest minds, incredible information, people that have gone through life, have learned lessons. And I think it is such an incredible gift. And I think it's just going to get bigger and bigger. It's truly democratic in so many ways. And that also it's giving the people the power, because 10 years ago, if you wanted to tell your story, you had to get on a major network. You had to be connected with certain people. Now, all you need is a computer with a camera, a microphone, and then you can tell your story. And how wonderful and exciting is that?
Well, it was also quite a daunting task for me to even think about what kind of a channel. And I thought to myself, what is the thing you want to do the least? And I said, it's talk about my sex addiction.
Yeah.
Because so few women are willing to come out about it. And I will tell you, there were a few moments where I went, no, I can't do this. But I'm like, I'm going to be 65 next summer. I've had a great life. So if people, look down upon me because I'm coming out about this addiction, so be it. And I have found in my life, the thing I want to do the least is usually the thing I need to move into. So that is how I started to look at really the areas I've suffered in the most, which has been my sobriety, sexual issues, and mental health. So I was like, well, what kind of words can I come up with around that? And I went sober, sex, and what about mental health? And then I thought, oh, the couch. Yeah, the sober sex sofa. There you go. So that is how she was born.
I admire your courage tremendously.
There is a reason that there's an A at the end of all these 12-step programs, which means anonymous, because when people come out about any addiction, could be alcohol, drugs, gambling, it has a stigma to it. But if you say sex addiction, the stigma is just through the roof, and especially from a woman, because, you know, we're supposed to be virgins when we get married, and we still have that mentality in this country. I don't know if it's as prudish in England as it is in America, but we have those roots, these prudish roots
Oh,
here.
we sent you the Puritans, remember?
I know, thanks.
You got the uptight English.
Yeah, so the other thing is, yes, I'm going to talk a lot on the channel about sobriety, sober sex, mental health, but I'm also going to talk a lot about just sex, whether you have an addiction or not. The reason I'm going to talk a lot about sex is because nobody wants to talk about sex. Because I was so challenged in this arena, I was basically my own personal lab rat. And I had an enormous amount of experiences in all different ways, extremely conservative, extremely out of the box. And I can relate to pretty much anybody's questions about sex, whether it's gay, straight, bi, tri, whatever you got going on. And I think that also women just don't know how to talk to each other about sex. When I had my coaching practice one-on-one, I can't tell you how challenging it was, whether I worked with a woman alone or with her significant other, of just getting her to open up and share some of her desires. It was, I like, wow, this is really something. And yes, this prudish, thank you very much for sending the Puritans over here. This foundation is very solid here in this country. But like I said, at my age, like, what are you going to do? I've already been unhireable in corporate world because of my memoir. So there you go already with that.
Which was a terrific book, by the way.
Yeah, writing my memoir really changed my life. I had to finally realize that whatever I thought my life was going to be is not exactly, I had to fully surrender to working in the addiction recovery field because it's the only people that would hire me. But it was a blessing. But it was a blessing because I love working with people who are challenged. I love helping people out of a dark place because I have been in many dark places. And it's really rewarding. So I can understand why you want to support people who are telling their stories.
The people that pretend in life, they know all the answers. They're just pretending. Nobody does. We're all in the dark. And I think the more that we're there for each other, and the more that we're honest, and the more that we're compassionate, I think the whole human experience is much richer. But it takes a degree of bravery. I know I couldn't talk as honestly as you.
Definitely, it propels me. I do so love supporting people in feeling better, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. It gives me great joy to see people flourish. So I'm going to bid you adieu. We could probably go on for 3 hours, but I don't think anybody would want to watch for 3 hours. But
my mom will.
I know.
Carol will. Okay. All right. Thanks so much.
You're so welcome. I just want to remind all of my listeners and watchers that if you want to send me a private email, many of you have already. Someday you shy people will actually put it on the chat. My email address is sobersexsofa@gmail.com, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. That's the end of part 1, but join me next week for part 2 with Stephen Pettinger.